Hey everybody, I'm Brandon Adams. Welcome into Chase for the Championship, Week 2 of our look at the College Football Playoff Top 25. I'll get ready to welcome in John Stinchcomb here in just a moment. I also want to remind you, though, that as Dog Nation's on the Chase for the Championship, we've got some big events coming up. Thursday, December the 2nd, we're going to be live once again at the Marlowe's in Brookhaven. Special event, live broadcast, but also a Q&A, get-together, enjoying some chef-inspired food there from Marlowe's as we talk about everything that needs to happen for Georgia to finish off this championship chase on a high note. We will do that there that evening. Marlowe's in Brookhaven. A lot of folks have been asking, when is Dog Nation going to be back at Marlowe's Tavern again? Well, now we have an answer for you. It's Thursday, December 2nd. We're looking forward to being there. Also coming up in just a moment, I'll tell you more about the big Dog Nation Chase for the Championship tailgate that's going to take place at the Home Depot backyard right next to Mercedes-Benz Stadium on the day of the SEC Championship. Your chance to get tickets, they're on sale right now. It's going to be a huge event. Anyone who's ever been with us for some of these tailgates before, you can certainly hear from them about how much fun this always is, and this event going to be no different. Going to be a great time. We'll tell you about all of that here coming up in just a little bit. We'll also talk a lot about the Georgia Bulldogs, ranked number 1 in the College Football Playoff Selection Committee Top 25 again this past week, and a lot to look ahead for the Dogs here over the course of the next few weeks. In fact, let's go ahead and get ready to bring in John Stinchcomb on that right now. John, Georgia number 1 again, and certainly I think proving a lot about itself with how it played against Tennessee this past Saturday. When you go on the road, when you can get a big win like that against an opponent like the Vols, face the test of the offense, feel the intensity of the crowd, and then come away with that ultimately dominant win that UGA got, certainly positioning itself in that number 1 spot there once again. I think that Georgia proved something to me last Saturday, and I'm assuming you'd say proved something to you there as well.
Yeah, what it proves is it's going to take 4 quarters to beat the Dogs. Obviously, Tennessee came out swinging. You look at the first quarter, and they were throwing haymakers. The first couple series, Tennessee's got a little momentum offensively, and we're playing competitive, good football against the number 1 team in the country. I think that's what any team that faces Georgia is going to have to do, except for 4 quarters. And Tennessee just ran out of gas, weren't able to keep pace with Georgia, and by the end of it, it was obvious that they were far outmatched and outclassed, and that's what Georgia has done all year. They haven't had the let-ups. They continue to keep their foot on the gas pedal, and showed again on Saturday that they are a complete team that every team they're going to face will have their hands full against.
It's been a while since Georgia's been 10-0. That's what the Dogs are right now. Also, for the first time ever, 8-0 in SEC play. And we talked about this a little bit on Chase for the Championship here last week about whether Georgia even needs to win the SEC Championship to make the college football playoff. And some of that discussion kind of erupted again after Georgia finished off its SEC slate with the perfect mark this past Saturday. But beyond that, John, there's also some other chatter that I want to address with you here right now, and I find this to be a little bit interesting. I'm going to give you a chance to hear from the ESPN analyst Chris "The Bear" Felica. The Bear's the guy that sits off to the side there on ESPN's College Game Day, and he also does a podcast each and every week with Stanford Steve, another one of those guys that kind of sits off to the side on some other ESPN shows. I guess it's the sideshow guys coming together for their own podcast. But the Bear, he's a big college football guy, and he had some interesting insight. And he said something about Georgia that I think is kind of interesting. It's at least worth us kicking around here for a moment. As I said, we debated last week, does Georgia even need to win the SEC championship game to make the college football playoff? Here's what Bear says, though. Let's say, for the sake of conversation, UGA doesn't need the SEC championship win to make the college football playoff. Even in a world where that's true, Felica says that Georgia still has plenty of reason to want to win the SEC championship, and his reasons go beyond the typical pride and bragging rights that come with knocking off Alabama and hoisting an SEC championship, a trophy that you and I both would say has a lot of prestige. For Felica, he says it's actually about more than that. Let me let you hear Chris Felica on this topic, and then I want to get your opinion on this. This is The Bear from an ESPN podcast this week.
One thing that people are going to say, I think in the next while, it doesn't matter for Georgia if they win or lose. They're in the title game. Oh, it matters. it definitely matters, because if they win, you're the number 1 seed, and we were having the debate before about who's going to be 4. Is it Cincinnati? Is it like if you lose, Alabama's going to be number 1, and you're going to be stuck in a 2-3 game with Ohio State. Mm-hmm. Like, you talk about a massive, but play Cincinnati or Ohio State. Like, what would you rather do? So like that SEC title game, and I'm sure Kirby and his staff are going to be ingrained, like beat Alabama, beat Alabama, beat Alabama, beat Alabama. It matters. So because if they lose, you're going to be stuck in a semifinal that is very worthy of being a title game.
So, John, to begin with, I would say you and I both think beating Alabama matters just on its own. Winning the SEC championship matters just on its own. But beyond that, how about the point that the Felica makes there, which is that a potential semifinal matchup against Ohio State is a significant enough game that the seeding actually does matter here. The difference between being, say, the number 1 seed where you play the number 4 seed, the number 2 seed where you'd have to potentially play that game against Ohio State, that this matters enough that you would want to avoid OSU to the title game if you had a chance to do that. Do you buy into the validity of what Felica is saying there in that statement?
I see where he's making his argument, but no, I look at it as Alabama is the clear number 2 right now, and so you're going to face them in the SEC championship. Outside of that, is Ohio State a very capable and dangerous offense? Yes. Are they a complete team? Not even close. Their defense is woefully mismatched from their offense. Statistically, they've got a top 5 offense and a top 50 defense. So there's quite the disparity there. Now, in an ideal world, are you just going to smoke through all the competition and finish undefeated and have the easiest route by going up against the number 4 seed? Yes, absolutely. But it still hadn't been decided that Ohio State, with their remaining schedule, that they're going to make it into the college football playoff. So a lot of projection right here. And fodder, which will sort itself out in the next 2 to 3 weeks.
I don't believe that Cincinnati is going to make the college football playoff, but in the statement that the Bear Chris Felica just made, he's using Cincinnati as kind of the stand-in team for that number 4 seed. If we want to keep this specifically to the parameters that Felica just mentioned, that it's Ohio State as a 2 or 3 seed and it's Cincinnati as a 4 seed, that if you had your choice of playing Cincinnati or Ohio State in this year, I think you clearly would rather play Cincinnati. And I say that knowing full well that the last time that Georgia and Cincinnati got together, it was actually a really good game in the Peach Bowl a year ago, and it turned out to be, I would say, a really good win for Georgia against a Cincinnati team that I have no doubt is one of the 10 best in the country a year ago, one of the 10 best probably in the country right now. But given who you would typically play in a college football playoff type scenario, if Georgia had a chance to play Cincinnati, as Bear says there, as kind of a 4 seed type situation, speaking as a Georgia fan for a moment, I would leap at the chance to play Cincinnati in comparison to who you would normally expect to play in that circumstance. And just at face value of what he was speaking about a moment ago, I would much rather play Cincinnati than play Ohio State if I'm having to pick my semifinal opponent. Do you agree with that?
Yes, because look who they'll have to beat in these last 4 games. They just beat a Purdue team that was hot. They're calling them a little bit of a giant slayer. Wasn't a matchup. I mean, Ohio State handily beat them.
Yeah.
They'll play Michigan State this week. They've got Michigan the week after, and then they go to the Big Ten Conference Championship. So if you finish with those final 4 games and you put together a good performance, I think that legitimizes Ohio State as one of those contenders for the championship. Not just getting into the matchup, but one of the teams that can make that run. I don't think the same could be said for Cincinnati. You look at who they have left, which is SMU and ECU. Even if they're finishing strong, it just doesn't have that same fear factor that Ohio State, riding a high of those 4 games into that first college football playoff matchup, that Cincinnati can come close to.
All right, so before our show is done, I'm going to let you hear some more from the ESPN guys on the subject of Alabama and that thing that just won't go away about could the Crimson Tide make the playoffs, 2-loss team. But for now, let me kind of focus in on this, that you heard a moment ago, the notion of, hey, Kirby's going to have these guys just tightened up about beating Alabama. Given the fact that seeding might matter, given the fact that you want to eliminate Alabama from the discussion, given all the things that Georgia might want, let's say this scenario exists. Let's say there are 7 minutes to go in the 4th quarter of the SEC championship, and Georgia is up 7 points against Alabama. Now, I do truly believe that if Alabama plays Georgia close enough, that it can still get the nod for the college football playoff. For a number of reasons, I believe that can be the case. I think last week you kind of argued a slightly different point on that. But let's say you're up 7 with 7 minutes to go. You've got 2 choices as a coach. You can salt away the clock and grind it out and try to get the win, playing somewhat conservative, which a lot of coaches would do there in that situation. or with the mindset of, if I got these guys down right now, I don't want to have to beat them a second time, so let me go ahead and try to punch it in, get the second score, go up 2 touchdowns, and remove all doubt about whether or not Alabama is still supposed to be in the college football playoff. Could you ever see a scenario where Georgia's not only just playing for seeding in the SEC championship, but also playing from a margin of victory standpoint so that it ensures the fact that it would only have to beat Alabama once? Could you ever envision a world where that's true?
Well, possibly. My thing is, I think Alabama is the number 2 best team in the country. Georgia's the clear number 1. And so if you get a chance to, salt away and eliminate the opportunity to face a second time an Alabama team that is very capable and had, one slip up against a quality Texas A&M team where they were playing their best ball and Alabama might not have. I think they came out a little flat in that game and found themselves in a fist fight that they didn't want to be a part of. With that said, if you get a chance to put away the number 2 team and you don't want to face them again, I think that's the mentality that Georgia's taken all year. They've had that killer mentality. They're the biggest dog in the fight in any fight they're going to be in. And so if you can stake your claim, not only positioning yourself for the college football playoff series, but in the SEC. I mean, Alabama has been the cupbearer and the standard by which every team has measured themselves for the past however many years. And Georgia can stake their claim now as there's a new sheriff in town. I think absolutely they would take advantage of that opportunity.
I thought there was a funny moment from the TV folks breaking down Georgia being number 1 again on Tuesday night. John, I'm going to play that for you in a moment. We're going to talk about what folks are thinking about UGA here, as it is once again number 1 in the college football playoff top 25. We're on the chase for the championship. Told you before about big things going on with Kroger. We appreciate Kroger presenting, coming up on SEC Championship Saturday, that huge SEC Championship tailgate. We're going to be live there at the Home Depot backyard. It's right next to Mercedes-Benz Stadium. A tremendous, tremendous event. Starts at 12 p.m. It's going to go from 12 to 3. It's all the food you can eat. It's the beverages, open bar, entertainment options. Also a tremendous Dog Nation Chase for the Championship T-shirt. You're going to get a chance to see that. Or you get a chance to get one of those. That's going to be great. So if you go to dognation.com, right at the top of the page, there is a link to go ahead and get your tickets. You can buy those now. You can be with us for our Chase for the Championship tailgate presented by our friends at Kroger and Marlowe's Tavern. That goes down on the day of the game. That's Saturday, December 4th. We'll be there from noon until 3 p.m. Tremendous event. Hope you can be a part of that. Make sure you check that out. A big thanks to our friends at Kroger and Marlowe's Tavern for making the Chase to the Championship possible all month long here as the Dogs begin in Atlanta. We think it concludes in Indianapolis with the national championship, and we're obviously looking forward to celebrating all of that with you. And John, obviously, as we do this on our show each and every week here on Chase for the Championship, one of the things that we're obviously talking about there as well is Georgia's positioning and what folks are saying about UGA. Now, in a normal year, it's that, hey, you'd just love to see your team climb the rankings. You'd love to see your team being mentioned in the college football playoff discussion. But in the case of Georgia, they've been ranked number 1 for quite such a long time, and they've seemingly distanced themselves in that regard each and every week. It's almost getting to the point now where everything that could be said about Georgia has kind of been said. In fact, there was a little bit of that on TV on Tuesday when the host, Reese Davis, kind of tossed it out there, showed Georgia number 1 once again, and from Joey Galloway and David Pollack, the rest of the guys there on the screen, it's a little bit of a shrug. I thought this was funny. Take a listen to this. This is ESPN's reaction to Georgia being ranked number 1 again.
They're 8-0 in conference play for the first time. That surprised me. I mean, they've been undefeated, but they haven't won all 8 since the SEC went to 8 games.
We got nothing else to say about
Georgia's been so good.
If you want to look at all 3 of us, we got nothing else to say.
They're really good on defense.
So I think it's kind of funny to hear Galloway and Pollack there, especially obviously it's a Pollack's alma mater. John, they just sort of give you the shrug of, at this point, what do you want us to say? They've held everybody in check all year long. They've not played a close game since week 1, and you're obviously an analyst there as well. You talk about this stuff, yourself, and I'm certain at a certain point you do sort of feel like everything that could be said kind of has been said, has it not?
Yeah, you set a new standard. This defense is elite, but at this point in the season, there's such separation between one and everybody else. I think that's unique. I think they're right in thinking that you can't bring anything new to the table. You're going to say that historically this defense is special. We're aware of that. What I think might be noteworthy that probably doesn't get enough mention is the fact that there's not real huge names that are household names across this country on either side of the ball. You're talking about one of the best defenses to ever play. I think fans were a little bit upset when Tennessee was able to score a second touchdown in a game. That is unheard of in today's football, that they've raised the standard to the point where it's an expectation that most teams Georgia faces aren't even going to get into double digits in the score column. So pretty impressive. And if you're going to talk about anything about this team, it's the fact that they do it across the board, all 11, both sides of the ball. And you can't point to 1, 2, 3 guys that really stand out and are those household names across the country.
And while David Pollack, Joey Galloway maybe been left somewhat speechless by UGA's dominance, I did think the selection committee chairman, Gary Barta, did have something interesting to say. I guess this is from a conference call after the rankings came out on Tuesday. Barta was asked about Georgia, and you mentioned the great defense, and obviously he noticed that there as well. But he also had some love for Georgia on the offensive side there, too. And I think that Barta's words here, the guy that's in charge of helping the committee select the 4 teams for the college football playoff, I think Barta's words are worth considering here. In fact, I think we have this. I think we can show this to folks, what Gary Barta said as a part of the conference call that he was a part of, saying that the Georgia offense is in the top 15 in scoring. James Cook had a big game this past week. Georgia has the best defense in the country, but their offense continues to play efficiently and play much better with each passing week. He says, and this is the line that gets you, it's just a dominant team on both sides of the ball. And, John, that's the thing that can't be forgotten here. When you look at, points per drive allowed, Georgia's obviously number 1 defensively, but when you look at points scored per drive, Georgia's 3rd nationally in that category there, too, that there is quite a high level of complementary football going on. Georgia's not as explosive offensively as Ohio State is, probably not as explosive offensively as Alabama is. But I don't think that any team has effectively combined both offense and defense as well as Georgia has. Bama's the one team in the country that comes the closest to that, but even from a statistical standpoint, Bama has also lagged in that category. And the way in which Georgia's playing complementary, playing much better on offense than some people have given them credit for, that's the kind of thing that I'm glad to see the selection committee chairman notice. And I'm sure you probably feel the same way.
Yes, and I think a big piece of that is not turning the ball over. I think this Georgia offense not only protects the ball really well, but they move it down the field efficiently. I think back to the years where Mike Bobo was the offensive coordinator, and you still heard Georgia fans complaining from time to time, and you think, man, they were scoring a lot of points in that era. And I think part of the criticism that this Georgia offense might have received this year is based on the other side of the ball. Georgia's defense is so special that it might put extra burden on this offense to perform. When they performed at a high level, you look at the amount of efficiency that they've had despite the number of injuries. We mentioned a little bit last week, the receiving core was decimated early on. The tight end position was hampered because of injuries early and this past Saturday as well, but yet still able to make huge additions. And what we came into the season thinking as a strength of that running back room continues to do so. And James Cook just seems to get better and better each week, and had a little bit of a national coming out party this past Saturday against Tennessee.
So with all that said, let me ask this to you, because here's, I think, the thing that even if some fans don't quite know how to articulate this, this is the feeling and the thought that I think exists there a little bit, which is, Georgia had a great defense in 2017, but they still gave up a lot of points against Oklahoma in that year's Rose Bowl. Or Georgia had a great defense in 2018, but still gave up 35 that year to Alabama in the SEC Championship. Or 2019 SEC Championship gave up 37 to LSU. That at a certain point in time, a team that's led by its defense and has, maybe just enough offense that eventually that runs into some trouble. Either it's a very close, hard-fought game like it was in the Rose Bowl in 2017, or loss close like it was to Alabama in 2018, or whatever you want to say about the LSU game in 2019. For the folks who want to know why this year is going to be different, obviously neither one of us can guarantee that's going to happen, but if you're confident and comfortable that this year will be different than previous years have been, what would be your answer as to why?
I think first you start with the opponent. I don't think there's a Joe Burrows or a Baker Mayfield-led offense the way those two teams were elite. I mean, that Joe Burrow's offense in LSU, you talk about elite and historic as you do this Georgia defense this year. I mean, they were playing at another level. I don't see another team like that. Ohio State, yes, they can score points. Yes, they have weapons. I don't think it's at the level that LSU was. I don't think they're humming along the way they were. Now, they have an opportunity to kind of get that way because of the schedule they have remaining. But I think a big piece of that picture is, one, Georgia had really, really good defenses those years. I feel like this defense is better. And number two, I think they went up against some really elite offenses, historic offenses, with marquee players at the quarterback position specifically that we just don't have this year in college football. I think those two things combined makes for a total different recipe when you look at Georgia versus anybody in this college football playoff series.
Yeah, I'd add two things to that as well, in that, if you look at Georgia right now, they have the potential to still play 5 more games, yet they also already have 34 sacks. By comparison, in 2019, Georgia only had 31 sacks the entirety of the year. 2018, another very good defense, just 24 sacks on the season. Even the 2017 team that was as good as it was and made the college football playoff, they also for the year only had 34 sacks. So you're talking about a Georgia team that's going to, at least if they keep the same pace up they've had going on, far exceed their previous high water mark for sacks under Kirby Smart. This is just a group that's more dynamic. 2018, 2019, those were stingy defenses. They didn't give up very many yards. They didn't give up very many points. But this defense is much more impactful, I believe. It's got 5-star players playing like first-round picks, and while the statistics may be similar to what Georgia's done in the past, the way in which Georgia's getting it done, I think, is far different. And I think you're also right to say that there's no Joe Burrow walking through that door. There's no Tua Tagovailoa walking through that door. The top quarterbacks in the country right now don't really resemble those guys. But conversely, I believe that even with all that Georgia's been through, injuries to wide receiver, a little bit of debate and controversy at quarterback, even with all the things that have happened this year, this is still a Georgia offense that's performing at a higher level than any other offense has performed with under Kirby Smart. I give Todd Monken all the credit for that. I think that Monken's offense is going to kind of hum no matter what pieces he has. He just seems like he's got that kind of offensive mind. He can just kind of find a way to make it work. But my answer for why, as a fan, I got the Georgia G on my shirt right now. As a fan, why I feel better about this team than previous Georgia teams heading towards that chase for the championship is not only are they very good defensively, but it's also a more impactful defense than previous UGA defenses have been. And also, I would say this is probably the best offense that's existed for Georgia in the Smart era, even if the way in which they've gotten it done is maybe with some different personnel than we probably would have assumed at the beginning of the season.
Yes, I think the loss of Adam Anderson certainly doesn't help this defense. He's a difference maker. But the fact that you still have Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Trayvon Walker across the board. Here's what I love about this defense. You talk about rushing the passer. How about our linebackers? There's a lot of times where a linebacker can get a sack if he's unblocked. Our linebackers are making plays because they've got the dog in them. They are getting after these quarterbacks even when it's tackles, guards, centers trying to block them. They're carving the edge, and they're affecting the passer better than any linebacking core I've seen in quite some time, just because of their tenacity. It's a mindset. You watch them play, and it's a difference maker. I also think that this Georgia offense, like you said moments ago, is able to put up the points and keep pace. You watch some of those games from years past, and the teams that had the success, the Alabama and the SEC championship game, the LSU game with Joe Burrows and company, there was some attrition that happened there. You watched that Georgia defense, they're throwing their best punches, but our offense, Georgia offense, wasn't able to keep pace. And by the end of the game, LSU was able to stretch it out. They were able to stretch those leads out because of the burden was placed solely on the shoulders of this Georgia defense. I don't think that's the case this year. I think the offense that Georgia puts on the field is able to attack. And like you, I think Todd Monken deserves a heap of credit because of his ability to find the mismatches, to utilize players as attack pieces. Who knew that? I think there were some high expectations for Bruce Bowers when he comes onto campus, but man, he gets out there and he's a baller. And the way they've deployed James Cook and The fact that they've continued to find opportunities and options for the various pieces as ways of attacking and off defense, I think that's what separates this Georgia team from some of the really good ones that we've fielded over the past 5 years.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. It's our chase for the championship. That's John Stinchcomb. I'm Brandon Adams. Happy to have all of you with us as we look at Georgia and its pursuit of a championship beginning in Atlanta a couple of weeks, finishing, we hope, in Indianapolis for the national championship game. And we're also taking a look at that college football playoff top 25 here right now as well. And I mentioned before that one of the hot topics remains Alabama at number 2, and the idea of, well, what happens if they lose close to Georgia? That continues to be a bit of a debate. In fact, it was on once again on TV on Tuesday, a little bit from Kirk Herbstreit, a little bit from Joey Galloway on kind of where things stand with Alabama, especially in comparison with a team like Cincinnati that's kind of quietly still undefeated. Not necessarily quietly because they've gotten plenty of chatter around them, but an interesting comparison nonetheless about what would happen to Alabama if it loses to Georgia, assuming it makes the SEC championship game in a couple of weeks. Let me let you hear that, and we'll talk more to John about it.
If Alabama lost to Georgia, you'd still think they'd have a chance to be over Cincinnati?
No, I think Alabama's out.
I don't understand the thinking in this era. In past eras, I get it. In this era, if Alabama sit at number 2, goes on to play Georgia close, and we hadn't seen one team come close to Georgia, if they should happen to lose in a close game, you then tell me because they have 2 losses, that means Cincinnati's a better ball club than them. To me, it proves that Alabama's the second best team in the country if they play Georgia close at the end because nobody has been able to stay close to them.
So that's obviously what Joey Galloway argues for. You hear Kirk Herbstreit express a slightly different opinion there. But, John, the other thing you got to consider here for a moment is Alabama's still got, certainly a tougher slate remaining than Georgia does. You made the comparison earlier between what Ohio State has to do playing Michigan State and Michigan to close out the regular season compared to some other teams there in a similar scenario. The Ohio State schedule is certainly very back-ended. Tough games here at the end, especially with how good Michigan State has turned out to be. Well, Alabama's a little bit the same way. Georgia's kind of coasting here, playing Charleston Southern Saturday, playing Georgia Tech to close out the regular season. Alabama has to take on an Arkansas team on Saturday that's ranked in the top 25, the College Football Playoff Selection Committee rankings for the second consecutive week, and then they have to go to Auburn to close out the regular season. Jordan-Hare Stadium being a place that Alabama has lost the last 2 times that it's been there. Is there still some thought in your mind here that Alabama, which has not been a perfect team this season, was fighting to win against LSU just 2 weeks ago? Well, what's the chances that Alabama trips up here one more time before the regular season is done?
I think it's possible, but I think it's probably more likely that they don't, and it just strengthens their resume heading into the SEC championship game. So I'm in the campaign and the boat of looking at if they complete their body of work. They beat Arkansas, they beat an Auburn team, they had the 1 loss. They head into the SEC championship game, and they lose to the number 1 team in the country in a close game. Then, to me, their comprehensive body of work is superior to almost any other team in the country, depending on how it plays out. You look at Oregon, who do they have left? They have Utah and Oregon State. Their biggest win was against Ohio State. That matters, but they also lost to a Stanford team. So outside of the Ohio State win, not a great resume. Same thing, somebody out of the Big Ten Conference, whether it's Ohio State or Michigan State, they will have proven their worth just because of the remaining schedules that they all face. Cincinnati, on the other hand, they've got the big win against Notre Dame, but other than that, they don't have that same pedigree. They don't have that same roster of victories that Alabama would, even with 2 losses. And I think that should matter. I think the fact that Alabama has played a more difficult schedule, and if that SEC championship game plays out to where they're hanging with the obvious and clear number 1 team in the country and lose, I don't think that second loss is on par with the single loss teams or the undefeated team like Cincinnati is. I just don't see their body of work being on the same level as Alabama's would be if they finish out the season against Arkansas and Auburn like they possibly could.
So I'm looking at these SEC West standings for a moment now. John, I have to confess, I'm not very smart, so it's very easy to flummox me when it comes to stuff like this. But if I'm doing this correctly, if Alabama lost the next 2 weeks, which is not expected to happen, but as I said, Arkansas is ranked, Auburn's beaten them a couple times here recently, then I think you could get a scenario where you could have 6 teams in the SEC West all tied at a 5-3 mark in conference. I have no idea what happened at that point in time, and honestly, Alabama will probably make this a moot point anyway. But you could conceivably have a 6-way tie in the SEC West. It would require Mississippi State also beating Ole Miss in the Egg Bowl. That'd be another big domino that have to fall there. But I mean, for those that there's always going to be a pocket of college football fans who just love chaos. It's not a 0% chance that we could still get a fairly chaotic conclusion to the SEC West season. You probably won't get that, but it's at least still out there.
It's a possibility, BA. I'll leave that to other minds to kind of think through what that might look like. It seems to be a lot of chips would have to fall a certain way for that to occur.
So let me just do a couple things real quick and we'll get ready to wrap up here for a moment. First of all, there's this. Oregon goes on the road to Utah on Saturday. Utah is actually a 3-point favorite in its own stadium. So this is that spot where we've seen Pac-12 teams, in particular Oregon in the past, we've seen them falter before. Is that the kind of thing that you expect to see happen here as well? A fizzling at the end for an Oregon team that's good enough to beat Ohio State early in the year, but not good enough to handle all of its business in conference play? I sort of suspect this Oregon team might be different than that, but what do you think about them going to a very tough Rice-Eccles Stadium down there in Salt Lake, just knowing that this is the kind of place where Oregon teams have faded in the past?
Can we play a game with me right here?
Please.
Because Utah is the number 24 ranked team in the country.
That's right.
Could you imagine Alabama, who is the number 2 team in the country? Oregon's the number 3 team in the country. Could you imagine them walking into a scenario where they are a 3-point underdog to the number 24 team in the country, and you still debate whether or not they belong in the college football playoff series?
That's an interesting way of looking at that. You're right. Because by comparison,
it's unreal to me.
Because by comparison, and if you give 3 points for being at home, what they're saying is that Utah-Oregon is an even game, a pick'em game on a neutral field. By comparison, Alabama is about a 19-point favorite? No, a 21-point favorite against Arkansas on Saturday. Arkansas is currently ranked 21st. So on a neutral field, you're going to take Alabama by about 18 points against Arkansas. It is a very different look at two teams and what top 5 in one conference looks like compared to what top 5 in the SEC looks like. I hadn't really thought about it that way, but that's a pretty fair thing to bring up.
Well, you're talking about Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Texas A&M, Auburn, Arkansas, Kentucky. All these teams have been rated higher than number 24 in the country that Georgia has played, that Alabama has played. And I don't know, you get to the point now where Oregon's only has one loss and you say, wow, this is a big game. Is it? It's the number 24 team in the country. I mean, if you don't expect them to win, which they're not expected as a 3-point underdogs, and they're the number 3 team in the country, I think it just shows it's not apples to apples. You play in the SEC, and it does mean more. The competition is better. It makes a big difference. Oregon played some cupcakes. They don't play the same schedule. So yes, they're the number 3 team in the country, and maybe they are a talented team, but they certainly don't have to prove it with the regularity that an SEC team does.
All right, last thing for you. We have seen Oklahoma, I want to say a fixture in the college football playoff, but they certainly made the playoff 3 consecutive years. They've been in the playoff plenty of times here. But they are currently, after losing to Baylor last week, now rated lower than any team that's ever made the college football playoff. At this stage of the game, you've got to kind of be in one of those top 10 spots, 1 through 9, to have any chance of making the playoff. And after losing, they fall all the way down to 13, although they could get a rematch against Baylor, who now moves up due to the win. They are now ranked at number 11. Do you think that mathematically Oklahoma is still alive? Can they buck the trend of being ranked outside the top 10 and still working their way back up? Or did that loss to Baylor last week eliminate the Sooners from contention in your mind?
Yeah, they're done in my mind. I think you look at the remaining schedules for Oregon, Cincinnati, and let's throw Notre Dame in there as well. 3 teams that are in that hunt that very realistically are not going to lose another game. So Notre Dame specifically, you look at, they're their number 8 team right now. They play Georgia Tech and Stanford to finish out the year. So you would fully expect them to finish with a winning record with that 1 loss coming to Cincinnati. Oregon, most likely is going to finish with that one loss to Stanford. Cincinnati's going to finish undefeated. That's 3 teams that they'd have to hop over that are all vying for that back end. Not to mention somebody out of the Big Ten, whether it's Ohio State, most likely, possibly Michigan, Michigan State. I just think they have way too far to climb, with other teams having a much easier schedule remaining for them to slide behind Oklahoma at this point.
John, always fun to get your thoughts on all this. I know you're enjoying the chase of the championship as much as I am. Obviously, this is a potentially historic year for UGA fans, and seeing how this top 25 plays out each and every week is a big part of that. Thanks for helping us break it down here today.
Hey, you know what's awesome? It's a fun season. Georgia's number one, clear
right.
and identifiably better than everyone else in the country. So if you want to talk about college football playoffs, I think this is the year to do it for any Dog fan, because what we're talking about is 2, 3, and 4. There's a clear number one, and they're wearing red and black.
John, I think that's great. We certainly appreciate your time, and for all of you there as well, thanks for being here. And, of course, we're going to ask a little bit more of your time coming up in the days ahead. Thursday, December 2nd, our friends at Marlowe's Tavern will be live there at the Brookhaven location for a special Chase for the Championship event where we'll get together and we'll talk about what it's going to take for Georgia to finish it off on a high note. Fun to be back at Marlowe's Tavern again. The Brookhaven location, always great hospitality there, chef-inspired food and everything else. That's going to be great. Also, our Chase for the Championship tailgate with our friends at Kroger and Marlowe's Tavern that following Saturday, SEC Championship Day, Home Depot backyard, right next to Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Starting at noon, we'll go from 12 to 3 p.m. there. Open bar, all the food you want to eat, special entertainment. Obviously, a Dog Nation Chase for the Championship t-shirt. Big opportunity for you to be with Dog Nation. These are always great events, and you get a chance to do that for yourself. So go to dognation.com to find out more about that. There's a link right there at the top of the page. You can get your tickets and be a part of that with us today. So for John Stinchcomb, thanks for being here. We'll see you back here next time for Chase for the Championship, presented by Kroger and Marlowe's Tavern, as the Dogs try to get it done in 2021. We'll talk to you then, everybody.